The lights were bright, the stage polished, and the crowd leaned forward in anticipation. It wasn't supposed to be a clash. It was billed as a policy panel, a calm exchange between polished leaders. Gavin Newsom smiled, adjusted his cuff, and leaned into the microphone with a tone dripping with ease. "Senator Kennedy," he said, the smirk carrying across the room. "You're out of touch." The audience chuckled. Cameras caught nods and smirks. The California governor thought he had landed the clean shot, a moment to remind the room of his dominance. But John Kennedy didn't move. He didn't flinch. He simply blinked, shifted his pen on the table, and let the laughter play itself out. Then, with a voice low enough to pull the room forward, he leaned into the mic. One sentence. Just one. And the polished studio froze. The smirk disappeared. The laughter died. And Gavin Newsom's hand tightened on the edge of his notes. This wasn't the kind of moment that goes away. It was the kind of line America would replay all night. And before we show you exactly what Kennedy said, make sure you're subscribed, because these are the clashes you don't want to miss. The cameras framed the table with precision. 4 nameplates perfectly aligned. The backdrop, draped in blue and white, carried the weight of official purpose. This wasn't built for fireworks. It was meant to be polished, curated, respectable. Producers whispered through earpieces as the crowd settled. Reporters adjusted their recorders, expecting sound bites they could predict before they were even spoken. On one side sat Gavin Newsom, hair combed to its trademark sheen, posture measured for the lens. On the other sat John Kennedy, shoulders squared, pen already tapping lightly against his legal pad. The panel began as expected. Each speaker rehearsed their lines, nodding at the right moments, glancing at the cameras when they needed emphasis. The rhythm was steady. Economic growth, infrastructure bills, the usual tug of war between states and federal oversight. But even in the calm, you could feel it. The subtle friction, the invisible line, stretched tight across the table. Every time Kennedy scribbled on his pad, Newsom's eyes flickered toward him. Every time Newsom's smile widened, Kennedy's pen tapped just a little louder. This wasn't going to stay polished for long. The panel's veneer of civility was cracking, even before the first real question hit the air. It didn't come from a moderator, and it wasn't part of the script. It came from Kennedy. Direct, unpolished, and almost too simple. He leaned into the mic, no theatrics, no grand build-up. "Governor," he said, his Louisiana drawl filling the room, "do you remember the last time gas prices in your state dropped for working families? Not the charts, not the promises. The last real time a mother could fill her tank without skipping groceries." The room shifted. Reporters glanced up. Newsom tilted his head, his smile holding for the cameras, but his eyes tightened. It wasn't just a policy question. It was a jab at the image he carried. The sleek governor with glossy answers. A reminder that behind every polished speech were families measuring dollars at the pump, groceries against rent. Newsom cleared his throat, chuckled lightly as if brushing it aside. But the laugh didn't land. It echoed too sharp, too defensive. And in that moment, the door swung open. Kennedy had forced the conversation out of polished talking points and into raw reality. The panel's tone was changed, no going back. Newsom straightened in his chair. His smile flickered, but he leaned forward, trying to reclaim control. "Senator," he said, voice carefully measured, "this isn't about gas prices in one state. This is about national leadership, about moving forward instead of clinging to outdated energy systems." The words were sharp, rehearsed, the kind of line designed for headlines. But Kennedy didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He lifted a folder, slid out a page, and read it word for word. "Governor, 2 months ago, you yourself told a crowd in San Francisco, and I quote, 'We've got to ask families to sacrifice more at the pump if we're going to be serious.' That's your sentence, not mine." The air shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't Kennedy versus policy. It was Kennedy versus Newsom's own record. The panel went silent. No tapping pens, no coughs, no whispers from aides. The pretending was over. The spin, the polish, the safe answers had no place against a line pulled straight from the governor's own speech. Newsom's face tightened, the grin fading just enough to show the strain. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Camera zoomed closer, and for the first time that day, it was clear. Kennedy had landed the first undeniable blow. The exchange had built like a storm cloud, thick with unspoken tension. Newsom leaned forward, his voice low but sharp, trying to frame Kennedy as outdated. "Senator, the country doesn't need relics reminding us of what used to be. It needs vision." The room shifted. Staffers scribbled. Cameras zoomed tighter. Kennedy didn't flinch. He just tilted his head, eyes locked on Newsom, and let a thin pause stretch longer than anyone expected. Then came the line. Simple. Surgical. The kind of one-liner that wasn't written by staff, wasn't rehearsed in front of a mirror. "Governor, vision's only useful if you're facing forward, not staring in the mirror." For a second, the air left the room. A few chuckles broke out from the back rows. Reporters leaned in, typing faster, catching the undercurrent of the strike. Even a couple of senators on the panel lowered their eyes as if trying not to grin. Newsom froze, the mask still on, but thinner now, cracking at the edges. The power dynamic had shifted, just like that. Newsom blinked twice as if his brain was searching for a quick reframe. He leaned back, forced a smile, and tried to push the weight of Kennedy's one-liner aside. "Senator, with respect," he began, his voice rising in that practiced cadence. "California is leading the nation. On energy, on technology, on progress. If you want to talk about mirrors, maybe you should check the one that's been fogged up in Washington for decades." It was meant to sting. It was meant to flip the script back in his favor. But the pivot was too clean, too polished. Everyone in the room could feel the difference. The line had been rehearsed, tucked away in a binder of comebacks, pulled out like a safety net, and it didn't land, because the contrast was clear. Kennedy's strike was raw, unscripted, real. Newsom's was prepackaged. Senators shifted in their chairs. Even the cameras seemed to catch the imbalance. One man in command of the moment, the other scrambling to make it look like he was. Kennedy didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just sat there, glasses low on his nose, letting silence do what words couldn't. The pivot had fallen flat. The governor was still talking, but the room wasn't listening anymore. When the red light above the main camera dimmed and the broadcast wrapped, most of the panel exhaled. Staffers began shuffling papers. Producers started unhooking microphones, and the crowd noise softened into a polite murmur. It looked like business as usual. Another panel completed, another headline written. But this one wasn't finished. Kennedy's one-liner, sharp, unplanned, and impossible to forget, hung in the air like static. Even with the cameras off, people in the chamber were whispering, side-glancing, leaning closer to catch reactions. Aides who normally moved quickly to the exits lingered, waiting for what might come next. Gavin Newsom knew it too. His posture had shifted. He was still smiling, but it was tighter, more defensive, like he'd been marked. He tried to turn to a senator on his left, to laugh it off, but even off-air, the chuckles didn't return. The silence had spread beyond the cameras, beyond the script. Reporters clutched their notepads tighter. They weren't writing about infrastructure anymore, or climate proposals. They were writing about the clash, the exact sentence Kennedy had thrown, the exact pause that followed. Because once a line like that lands, it doesn't fade when the cameras cut. It leaks into headlines, into late-night talk shows, into conversations at kitchen tables. That one exchange would follow Newsom past the studio lights, past the headlines, all the way into the months ahead. And Kennedy, he simply packed his papers, adjusted his glasses, and walked out. Calm, silent, unbothered. The senator who had said less, but somehow left more behind than anyone else in the room. The chamber emptied slowly. Lights dimmed, cameras shut down, and staffers hurried to sanitize the floor with carefully worded talking points. But no one in that room, not senators, not reporters, not even Gavin Newsom himself, could unhear it. Kennedy's one-liner wasn't flashy. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. It cut once, deep enough that the echo carried. Newsom's smile had cracked, the audience had frozen, and the cameras had caught everything. And here's the truth, moments like that don't require a repetition. They live in the silence after. They replay themselves over and over because everyone present knows they witnessed something that will follow them into tomorrow's headlines. Kennedy walked out without looking back. He didn't chase the moment. He let the moment chase him. And that's why it worked. If you found this breakdown gripping, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and drop a comment. What did you think of Kennedy's one-liner? Did it cross a line, or was it the exact check that needed to happen?